I mean, those 9 months, you know where they are at all times,
Right.
and what they're doing, basically, and you get the checkups and stuff, and you have all the, the discomforts that with pregnancy. But then it's life,
Yeah.
and it's their own choices, and they're not always with you, and there's all these different things that you gotta factor in, and that is very difficult, especially if someone does not have adequate food, shelter, and education.
Hey guys, welcome to the Reconcile podcast. I'm Sam Valenzuela.
And I'm Zach Diestler, and with us as always is our audio tech and sound engineer, Trey Bartolo. Say hi to the people, Trey.
Hey, how you doing?
We are pastors seeking to help reconcile the division that we see in the church as well as our culture, doing so by building bridges one conversation at a time.
And each episode is going to be focused on a particular issue. We'll explore what's being said about the topic, both inside and outside the church, and examine our differences with love and compassion, seeking first to understand and then to be understood.
That's right. And so today we're going to be discussing the issue of abortion. So I guess you could say we're starting out in the deep end.
Yeah, we're not messing around. We're just going to jump right in. But before we dive, we're going to make sure that you stay tuned for next week's episode when we talk to a good friend of ours who has an opposing viewpoint on this issue. But until then, you are stuck with two guys talking about women's reproductive rights. So, Sam, how do you feel about tackling this issue?
Fantastic. But before we kind of dive into that, I just want to help remind us and anyone who's watching or listening what this podcast is all about and why we do this. And so maybe we can kind of go over some of the premise of what we're going to be heading into and why we're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, we called this the Reconciled Podcast because we know that we're going to have to be reconciled to some difficult issues. And in order to be reconciled the way that Jesus would want us to do, I think we're going to need to follow his words.
That's
and
right.
Follow the words of the Bible.
Makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, right? So we talked about James last episode, and I just want to read James 1:19 through 20 again. And actually, I didn't read this first part. I just realized. I love that the NESB puts this in there. You know this is how it starts with.
Yeah.
You know this, my beloved brothers and sisters. Now everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For a man's anger does not bring about the righteousness of God. And that's so important that we are doing this in our conversations, that we are quick to hear, that we are slow to speak. And in this issue in particular, that is not the case. We're not listening.
No.
We're just speaking. And we are not being slow to anger either. There's just so much anger on this issue, and it does not bring about the righteousness of God. So we have to be super careful about how we talk about this, and that's why we're doing this podcast.
Yeah, especially any topic that we talk about is we understand that there's going to be a level of an emotional charge behind it. We understand that, and in fact, if we're honest with ourselves, we have some of that in ourselves as well. And so keeping in mind James chapter 1, verses 19 and 20, as well as 1 Peter 3:15, that says, "But sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is within you, but with gentleness and respect." I think it's incredibly important that we focus on the realization that we have the ability, in fact, we're called to be able to have a defense for what we believe in, for our faith, but there's a way to do it. We need to be able to have a sense of gentleness and respect to anyone that we come into contact with, and that's something that I think we've missed greatly, especially on this issue. Yeah. And so hopefully we can kind of remind ourselves, hey, look, if we're going to try to follow the model of Jesus, we need to remind ourselves that even Jesus approached anybody with gentleness and respect, whether they wanted to follow him or not. And so I think that's something that we need to constantly remind ourselves.
And there's a lot of information out there, a lot of conversations, but again, it's not a lot of bridge building, a lot of wall building.
Yeah.
I mean, really. I mean, that's just the basic, like every argument seems to be another brick in the wall that is just dividing us. And it doesn't, as we talked about last week too, like, even preparing to talk about this, I got to be very honest. Like I started to think about all the arguments that I could build. You know? And as I'm building, I really felt like I was like building a wall within myself. And I mean, we had this conversation yesterday. I mean, like just yesterday, we started to kind of shift gears a little bit because I was feeling convicted. Like, man, first of all, I'm not adding to the conversation. It's already being done. But also, like, I feel like I'm starting to get really rooted and starting to get like, I don't know, not just ingrained in my position, but like so firm that like I wouldn't be able to be open to listening. And I
hardened,
hardened. That's a great word for it. It's like I was feeling hardened, and I was and not compassionate. And really starting to go, man, we got to do this differently. But it comes from a fear, and I just want to just put that out there. Like, there's a real fear. My number one fear is that I don't want to misrepresent Christianity. You know, like I guess I should say it differently. I don't want to misrepresent Christ. You know, the Bible. You know, like but I think it's because of how Christianity has approached this topic that it makes me so afraid. Because I'm afraid that if I say I'd like to listen, I'd like to embrace some viewpoints. I want to build some bridges. That people are going to say, you know, like, well, then it's on you. You know, the blood of innocent children is on you. And I mean, I've heard that phrase being used to people who are pro-choice. And I know where they're coming from. I don't think that a lot of them are coming from that place of anger necessarily, like of just like being mean to just be mean. Like they're actually really, I think a lot of them truly believe that, you know, these are innocent children who are being murdered, and they have to atone for that, and they don't want any more. And if anyone says anything that could possibly lead to an exception or lead to different opportunities for that, then we're on the side of allowing that. Like we've opened the door for it. And it's just it's a fearful thing for me. I mean, I really didn't want to. I mean, it's still within me right now. Like, even as I'm talking to you right now, I'm like I don't want to misrepresent. It would be way easier to just go through arguments that we know, maybe add a couple ones that we think, you know, would be maybe adding a little bit to the conversation, and then just say, okay, that's it. This is where it is, and if you don't believe this, then you don't believe the Bible. And just end it that way. But I don't think that that's helpful.
No, I mean, it's very much tantamount to like we say we're going to build a bridge, you know, like driving by an open lot, and they usually have like a sign of some sort saying, "Hey, CVS going to be here in 2022," but it never gets built. You know, that's essentially what we're doing when we do that. Like we put up a sign saying, "Hey, bridge going to be completed by 2021." It never gets built. No one, in fact, no one even shows up to build. We just put the sign up there to make ourselves feel better that, hey, we're letting everyone know that we want to build a bridge, but it takes too much work. It takes too much planning. It takes too much care to approach that, because there's so much complexities to this conversation that there's a lot of fear of going into it. And maybe even, like we talked about it last week, maybe even we began to lose a couple of things that we held on to about this in the process, and that's a fearful thing. So I totally understand that.
Yeah, no, it is a big fear, you know, and I don't want to add to the vitriol. I don't want to add to, you know, people being upset on either side. Like I know that we're going to upset people on both sides. Like, that's just going to be the bottom line. People who are pro-life, who are especially staunchly pro-life, where there's no exceptions and it's just, this is the way it is. Like they're not going to enjoy, you know, us trying to wrestle through these difficult issues. And people pro-choice are not going to enjoy some of the places that we land. You know, and so it sucks to upset both people, you know? And I mean, personally, I'm not a person who enjoys
upsetting people.
Upset at them. You know, it's something I'm working on in therapy, which is not a joke. It's real. But it's an important thing, you know, of like, look, we have to do this, you know? And we were talking about it. Obviously, if you didn't feel the same way, we wouldn't have, you know, or if Trey felt differently too, but I know that we land in the same place of like, you know, this is worth it. It's worth with a topic like this, and almost any of the topics, but with this topic, it's worth what's going to come at us. And maybe people won't even say it; they'll just think it. But it's worth it to really try to do this. Like we're really trying to seek to understand. Like we want to know what is going on this side and on this side, and really trying to find a way to reconcile those things. And maybe we won't be able to. You know, we're not really in charge of the outcome on this one. You know, we're just in charge of the process.
That's so true.
And I think the last thing that's kind of difficult to talk about too is the fact that we're guys. I mean, we'll just put that out there.
Let's just be honest.
Yeah, and it's hard, and I get that. I mean, from the get, let's just go there. Like, yeah, it's difficult to have two guys talking about an issue that is fundamentally about women's reproductive rights. Right. And I think that I get that point of view, and I understand that. I think that the other side of that is the reason why I felt like we could still do this is because I think it's important for men to be part of this conversation too.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
And it's not a great appeal to be like, and we never want to have that kind of dialogue with anybody either of appealing to experience as being like the thing that is above everything else.
Right.
Like, so if I've had an experience, or like I come from a Jewish background, so therefore, you know, if you want to speak about things about Judaism or Islam, Israel, or Islam too. Right. If you want to talk about anything that I have an experience with, you're not allowed to speak because I'm the expert, and you just need to sit and listen. And I understand that there's a point for that, but then after we're done talking, like there needs to be a response.
I think there's a clear, I wouldn't say cry, but almost like a clear plea for a certain level of involvement from men in this issue, and not necessarily from the aspect of legislation and directing and domineering the topic, but when we start to unpack and park in certain areas and tease out certain things, I think we might even be able to identify a thread that there's a certain plea for men to step up. And even personally, as a male Christian, I do believe that we should be speaking up about this issue. But I think when that phrase comes out, speak up about this issue, there's a certain assumption of what that means.
Right.
And what I'm talking about is something completely different.
Yeah.
You know, there's a huge issue with men not being who we've been called to be when it comes to relationships, when it comes to raising families, when all of that, you know, being included, that we've kind of ignored. And I think there's a reason that there's a plea for men to kind of step up to what we've been called into, that we've been abdicating for so long.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, really within this issue is a lot of father abandonment.
Yeah.
You know, well, and it's true, like the woman has to carry the responsibility for those 9 months. And so it is easier for the guy. And so what you're speaking to, I think, is great. I think it's a great way to look at it, instead of like saying, okay, we shouldn't speak because no, actually, let's bring them involved. Yeah. The very fact that they're not speaking is also then promulgating this problem of them. Okay, we won't speak on it and we won't be involved, and that's a problem because it takes two. You know, to make a child. Yeah. And those two need to be in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we did look up a lot of quotes from different pro-choice websites and different kind of organizations that have a lot of great things to say about this issue, and we wanted to make sure that we understood. So what we're going to do, since we're kind of on the same page as far as like what we believe about this issue, we wanted to examine some of these quotes and be able to read them out, and then also respond to them and try to see if we can really seek to understand these things. So, Sam, do you want to start with the first one?
Yeah. So this is from I'm totally going to butcher this name. Guttmacher?
Yeah, Guttmacher.
We'll put the reference.
It's up. The institute that does all the statistics for Planned Parenthood.
Thank you. This is one of the quotes that we found. It says, "Anti-choice leaders see sexuality, especially women's, divorced from procreation as shameful, women as inadequate to make weighty moral decisions, and forced childbearing as appropriate punishment for sexual irresponsibility. They approve of requiring women to pay out of pocket for contraception while ensuring insurance plans cover men's access to Viagra, reducing sexuality education to a just say no mantra, and co-signing those teenagers who say yes to the deadly risks of unprotected sex, and denying poor women the means to obtain abortions, yet refusing to help them provide adequate food, shelter, and education for the children they bear." Now, I'm going to be honest. There's a lot. As I'm reading this, there's portions of it where I'm kind of cringing as I'm reading it. And yet this is going to be our time, right, Zach? This is going to be our time to squirm in front of you guys. Okay. So
this is live reconciliation.
Yes. So reading this and trying to really posture my heart to, okay, where is this coming from? Where is the main hurt? Where is the main concern based out of? And even after thinking about that and praying, I kind of have to agree. And it was so much so that I'm actually kind of convicted by this, because what I see in here is almost a cry of, hey, you know what? There's so much discussion on forcing women who are pregnant to carry the pregnancy to full term, and then to bear the child, and then there's no support. There's no coming alongside that woman with whatever situation that she may be in, because a lot of these times we're seeing, it was a failed relationship, and so the girl is now stuck with having to carry this child on her own. And there's so many external factors that are going on in this woman's life that we just simply don't know about. It's irresponsible for us to make a blanket standard for such a complex issue. And so when I see things like refusing to help them provide adequate food, shelter, and education for the children they bear, talk about being like stabbed in the heart with truth. Like, man, how much does the church, in the efforts of talking about abortion, continue that discussion once that child is born? How much do we actually step up to come alongside the woman who has to deal with that pregnancy physically, mentally, emotionally, in whatever season of life she's in? She could still be in high school. As former youth pastors, we know how challenging that could be in high school, in college, just out of college, trying to get their career path, it's established. And like, there's so many different areas of external factors that are coming into this, that come into the decision making for this woman to consider abortion. And if we do everything that we can, we pour in all of our efforts to, okay, you got to keep that baby. You got to keep that baby. You got to keep that baby. Once the baby's born, where are we now?
It's so true.
Why aren't we? Why aren't we come alongside these women and supporting and, I guess to summarize that point, it just feels like there's not a lot of follow through on the church's point. And I say church, I include myself in this. Reading these, I actually started, again, I'm being convicted because even I didn't really think far beyond the birth. We honestly, it's an ends to, the goal is birth. Yeah. Once the baby's born, we're on to the next abortion issue. Yeah. Right. But there's not, where's the support? I mean, God calls us to be the father to the fatherless, to be a shelter for those who are looking for a shelter. We have experiences with serving the homeless out in Oakland. We've built relationships with people out on the street. Like, we consider them friends. Yeah. And it isn't
enough just to give them a meal for that day.
Right.
And to say we did it.
Exactly. And especially since we're talking about, we're trying to reflect Christ. Yes. Christ was all about relationships. Yeah. Relationship is a continual thing. It's over time. Yes. Effort, concerted effort, care. And
I think you're hitting on it. I think that the fight for them to live should be the same vigor, the same passion for them to stay alive, to have everything that they need to be able to stay alive and to thrive. To really be able to live a full life and not just check it off of our list, because I think that's the danger, right? Is that just like when we were talking last time about how when we try to get people to salvation conversations and we go, okay, we got one, like it's a notch on our belt. I remember there was people in my old church where they were talking about how many people they've led to Christ.
Yeah, I never understood that personally.
No, it doesn't make sense, right? It's like, man, that's such an ego thing. Like, you led them to Christ. Oh, okay. You did. It wasn't the Holy Spirit. Right. It wasn't the other people who had been in their life for a certain period of time, kind of planting seeds and watering. Exactly. You reap the harvest. And I think that's the problem here, is like that, okay, we stopped an abortion, so we saved a life. And then you're on your own now.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it is.
We want you to be in church, we want you to be saved, but it's way too messy to then like, okay, now what? Now we have to engage with you on a daily basis.
What kind of resources do you need? Because it does require for us to sacrifice. Yeah. I think that's the thing. The American church has kind of developed into this almost like a department store. Yeah. This is my department. Yes. And if what you need doesn't meet my department, then I'm just going to refer you to the other department, as opposed to, no, we're all one body. Yeah. Like, if I'm here, then there's a reason why I'm here, and there's a reason why God placed you in my path. Maybe I'm not the person that you're supposed to get resources from, but heck, I probably should know somebody that should have that resource. And that's something I was talking to my wife about the other day about, like, I can't remember the last time I was in a church where I actually knew if the church was partnered with any kind of organization that would come alongside girls and young women who were in a pregnancy crisis.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm sure there are, but there's not a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
You know?
And
so
that's the bottom line. There's
really?
not a lot. Because I've been to a lot of churches in the Bay Area.
Right?
I haven't seen that.
And especially as pastors who are working like in these churches,
Yeah.
no one ever tells us, like, oh yeah, if this is ever an issue, this is how you can connect them to resources that will support them. Man, talk about an indictment on the church.
Well, and I remember Francis Chan talking about this stat, and I don't know where it came from, so I can't quote it directly, but it really impacted me when I heard it, because he was basically saying that the amount of children who are in foster care equals the amount of churches that there are in America.
Wow.
Maybe it's the world, but I'm pretty sure it was America, because it was foster children in America and then churches in America. And if just one couple in that church, just one, not every single couple, because not everyone's called to do that,
Right.
but if just one in that church was to adopt, then it would empty out the foster care system.
Wow.
Which is really impressive. You know,
Man.
like it's indicting.
Yeah.
Because it's saying, wow, where are we stepping up in this? You know, where are we coming alongside? Because it is messy. And I think that's what we talked about last week too. Like, conversations, dialogues are messy. Like, life is messy, and it just isn't clear cut. Like, even people that I've been privileged to come alongside, and I know you have too, to baptize, to disciple. It's never a done thing. You're never like, even when you're like, oh, they went to Christian college and they got married and they're having kids and they're plugged into their church, you know, like, even with that, which is, I'm just getting to that point now as a youth pastor. That's how old I am, right, Trey? Even with that, it's not like they're done.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, then I don't need to check up on you. You know, your life is set now.
Yeah.
You know, no, because there's challenges after challenges after challenges. And I think you're bringing that to the forefront, that this is challenging.
Yeah.
You know, bringing a life in this world is a huge deal. It's a huge deal. And it is not just a one-time thing where you just bring the life in and then you're set. You know, that's just the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, in one sense, I would think, and again, if we're men here speaking about pregnancy and stuff, but in one sense, I would think those 9 months are easier than the rest of the time, because, I mean, those 9 months, you know where they are at all times,
right?
And what they're doing, basically, you know, and you get the checkups and stuff, and you have all the the discomforts that with pregnancy, but then it's life, and it's their own choices, and they're not always with you, and there's all these different things that you gotta factor in, and that is very difficult, especially if someone does not have adequate food, shelter, and education. And if I mean, again, we're not going to get into like the whole politics of this really, because I mean, that's like a whole nother thing. And like you said, we'll be here forever. But if we're not supporting policies, you know, I think shame on us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just do. I mean, and I understand people that, you don't really understand it. You don't understand economics of it. And you're right. I don't. But I mean, I understand humans.
Right.
And humans need things and support. And doesn't mean that they have to have that support for their whole life. And it doesn't mean just because you give someone support for a little bit, they're going to become dependent.
Right.
That all these things that we're doing, we're saying that this is what's going to happen. I think that's the biggest problem with this whole conversation, is that we know what's going to happen.
Right.
And I think that's on both sides. That we know, you know, what's going to happen here. We know what's going to happen here. And I think that that's arrogant to say we know what's going to happen. Like, this life will be like this, or this life will be like that, or if they get support, they'll always be on welfare, or if they don't choose abortion, they'll be a criminal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you can go in all these ways of like, we don't know that. All we know is that loving people is hard and supporting them is hard. But if you truly care, you might be able to lead someone somewhere.
And it's costly.
It is
whether
costly.
It's your time or your dollar. It's costly.
It's costly.
You know, relationships are costly, and so I get it. Like, I get people's concern about the financial ramifications of something like this, and right, and the reality is these things are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Right. I can sit here and say, you know what, I still believe in the desire to safeguard unborn lives.
Yes.
And I actually agree with what this person is saying.
Right.
Because I'll put myself in the front of the line in front of the church. I have not done enough to support women who are in need.
Yeah.
Regardless of what their considering God has called me to support and love them, which is going to be costly. It's going to take time, and it's going to be a lot of sacrifice on my part to be able to put aside my judgments, put aside my condemnations, and just simply look at this woman as an image bearer of God. Yeah. And that's ultimately the foundation of our kind of standpoint on this issue, is that in Genesis, God says that he created us with his image. Yeah. And if we value God, then we should also value each other for that very simple principle. Yeah. The principle is simple, but the application in here, it gets very complex.
It does.
And so we want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In that same article, there was a discussion about wantedness and welcome and how difficult it is with the decision to have a child, and even more than the decision to have an abortion is what it says, carries profound moral implications. Unless a woman is willing to bear a child and give it up for adoption, she should have children when she feels she can welcome them. A mother's freedom to decide whether and when to have an additional child contributes immeasurably to the welfare of the children she already has, as well as any yet to be born. A teenager's decision to delay having a child until a time when she can provide adequate financial and emotional support increases the probability that when she does decide to have a family, it will be healthy and stable. Indeed, many women who decide not to have a child at a particular time do so out of reverence for children. And I'm with you. It's like I'm trying to understand this, Like I get the heart that's behind it. I think is really trying to make sure that you are prepared. Yeah. That you are ready, not just with the finances and resources, which I think is an important thing, which we just talked about, but emotionally. Yeah. To welcome this child into your life and to say you're a part of our family, you're a part of me, and we're going to do this right. And if you're not ready yet in that moment, what are the possible damages that can happen because of that? To plan to be and one thing we can say that I think we would all agree upon, at least, well, I shouldn't say we all, that's ridiculous, but something that maybe a majority of us could agree on is that birth control in of itself is not abortion.
No, that's not.
Using contraceptives is not abortion. No. You're not taking a life and removing it. You're preventing. You are planning your parenthood, which I understand even the name of Planned Parenthood, I may not agree with everything that they stand for, but I understand their name. Their name has a good message in the sense that we want you to plan your parenthood.
Absolutely.
And we would agree upon that, like that. Yeah. We want this to be planned, and so if it wasn't planned and then the pregnancy occurs, the profound impact upon the woman, not just, resources wise, but also just emotionally, like I don't know if I can care for this. And I want to see, and I think that's the thing, like, that's where I really want to see the heart of this. And I know that maybe some people could say that's not what they believe. And I'm trying to break that myself. So please join us in breaking that habit of thinking that what someone else is thinking. Yeah. And just hold on for a second. And maybe they're thinking, I want to love this child. Like I want to be there. Like I want to be a good mom. Like I can't wait for that. Yeah. But not now.
Yeah. I'm not there yet.
I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet. And I want to be, but I can't. I'm not. And if I'm forced to be in that position, I don't really know how well I'm going to do this. Yeah. And I'm going to mess this up. And not that they're going to cause harm, like in some sort of like I'll hurt my child, like physically or whatever. But I mean, I won't be able to be there for them the way that I want to be. And I think that there's really something to that. I think that's, I get that, I'm not sure I can go there with the solutions. Like you said, like it's not about the how do we solve that problem? That's a different thing. But I totally get the heart of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think, again, we talked about before we even dove into these quotes, right? We have fears about even talking about this. Yeah. And it's a multifaceted issue. The fear itself is a multifaceted issue. With this, I mean, man, who cannot resonate with the fear or anxiety that comes with being unprepared? Yeah. Whether it's financially, mentally, emotionally, like whatever the issue may be, there's an anxiety that's very real that lands on everybody's hearts when they realize that they're not prepared. I get that. Yeah. And I've had conversations with my wife. We're somewhat financially prepared, right? Or we're somewhat mentally prepared. But talk about like, we understand that bringing a new life into this dynamic has huge ramifications.
Yeah.
Man, talk about I can easily damage a young child by saying the wrong thing at the wrong time and really distorting their view of their relationship with their father or their perspective on themselves.
Yeah.
I understand that, which makes me incredibly trepidatious about just, hey, let's just bring a kid in.
Right.
Because I understand how it can land and how quickly I can really damage relationships around me. And so I understand where this fear is coming from.
Yeah.
And especially when it's unplanned. Like, imagine if it was possible for men to be pregnant,
Right.
and we woke up tomorrow morning, wow.
Yeah.
You know, that wasn't because we ate a lot last night. It's because we have a child growing. Like, we understand what it means to take care of that thing. Man, talk about the fear, the anxiety, the stress.
Yeah.
And when you feel like you're backed into a corner, when
Yeah.
you feel like there's no one there to support you, again, which is the reason why I think there's a bit of a thread here of there's a plea for help. There's a plea for assistance and support.
Yes.
That a lot of times us as men, I'm not saying every time, but a lot of times us as men, we're not meeting that. We're not stepping up.
We're not stepping up. And I think that the church is not stepping up either. I think that you're right on with this. Like, we need to be supporting these women. We need to be supporting these couples. You know, we're not just saying that all women, you know, are single mothers in this situation either. Like, we want to be supporting the couple and providing the resources they need mentally as well, emotionally. You know, I think that there's a stigma that is slowly being, I think, erased in the church with psychology and, you know, psychological counseling and things like that. And of course, I'm seeing very biased because I'm literally pursuing my master's in that right now. Shout out to Western Seminary.
All right.
But I mean, I really feel like this is a part that we're missing too, is that, you know, if we're going to say that we can identify with this as a struggle, you know, which I'm trying to do, because I think I can identify, and I think we're identifying that this is a real struggle mentally. The solution, you know, obviously for some of these women has been abortion, because like those things that you used to talk about, like if we're not prepared for a certain thing, a lot of the times we don't need to make a moral choice, you know, on those things. We can go, hey, I'm not really ready for this job, so I'm going to need to get trained, you know, so I'm going to have to say no, I'm going to quit, you know, because I'm not ready for this position, or I'm not going to put my name in for the promotion.
Right.
This is different. Yeah. This has a lot more ramifications and implications. But if we're going to say you can't go that route, you can't just, you know, take care of, get rid of the baby. You have to stay with it. Then we need to come alongside and go, okay, what can we do to help you be ready? And I know that you say that you're not ready and that you can't be ready right now, and it's not going to be able to be. Let's talk this through. Let's examine these issues. You know, like really trying to get to the core of this. Like what are these things, and talk through the thought process. So, what is it that practically this means? You know, and where can we come alongside and support?
You know what? I think you're so spot on. You're so spot on that, again, conversations like this need to be happening more often, right? And I also acknowledge, like, man, talk about like when an overwhelming sense of fear grips your heart, even all of the resources and support that's being presented to you couldn't change your mind, right? This is a really bad analogy, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Okay.
I am deathly afraid of heights. You challenged me to go skydiving.
That's true.
When was that?
Last year.
Last
2 years
year?
ago. Yeah.
Oh man. Oh, man. Okay. So challenged to go skydiving. We got in a plane, and as the only person stuffed in that plane afraid of heights, I get placed right by the door. And of course, they thought it was great to like open up that door while we're ascending. And I'm just like looking over, and I'm quite literally fighting the urge to urinate on myself. Like, it was so scary. But the thing is, I had someone tandem to me, someone who's gone down so many times. He knows exactly what to do. Even if there was an emergency, I am connected to him, and he's the one that's really doing all the work. Yeah. It didn't matter. I still didn't want to jump. Yeah. And so I understand that fear. I understand that even though you're being told, hey, we got you. Yeah. If anything were to go wrong, you're not alone. In fact, someone who's gone through it, is trained to handle that, is going to be right there with you to make sure that you're not going to fall flat on your face.
I think it's a good analogy. I know it's not perfect. No analogy is perfect.
Right, yeah.
Not just because I'm your friend.
I appreciate that.
No, I mean someone to be with you.
Yeah.
I think that's really good. Yeah. You want to take the next one?
Yeah. The next one is it says the pro-life versus the pro-choice debate tends to overlook the fact that the vast majority of women who have abortions don't do so by choice, at least not entirely. Circumstances put them in a position where abortion is the least self-destructive option available. According to a study conducted by the Guttmacher Institute, 73% of women who had abortions in the United States in 2004 said that they couldn't afford to have children. And again, I think we've been talking about this. The vast amount of these abortions, at least in this study, highlight a very real, legitimate fear.
Yeah.
Not being prepared. For this one, it was financial, but we talked about emotional.
Yeah.
Environment-wise, like, man, I've never lived on my own. I've always had roommates. I've always needed roommates.
Right.
So to find myself in a position where I'm going to take care of a child by myself on my own.
Yeah.
That's
hard to find roommates when you're like, hey, like, could we live together? And
exactly.
By the way,
I have a kid that's going to wake you up at 2 a.m,
right.
4 a.m, 6 like
that's
not going to happen, you know? And so like, I think we need to kind of step into that and say, okay, these fears, legitimate. I get it, you know? And so, but then like you said, there has to be another way. We feel that there could be another way. And so let's open up that dialogue and see where we can figure this out.
Yeah, and that dialogue is going to be hard, you know, especially I'm thinking, and I'll just jump in here since we're already in the deep end.
Yeah.
And when we talk about rape, you know, because I was looking at this wording here, circumstances put them in a position where abortion is the least self-destructive option available. And I mean, you know, actually I was talking to your wife about this yesterday, and I think you guys were having this dialogue as well, but like, what would it mean for someone to be raped and then to become pregnant and then to carry that baby for 9 months?
Yeah.
And even if they planned on giving it up for adoption, the conversations that would be constantly being had.
That's right.
You know, people coming up, well-meaning people. You know, I mean, I think this might have been quote unquote easier in a time where we weren't so like socially active, and maybe we all lived on farms that were like miles away from each other. You know, like you weren't, you know, you just kind of had your own life, and you could be gone for 9 months and no one really worried about it. You know, but I mean, in this day and age, you can't just be disappeared for 9 months. You know, that's not something you can do. Like this is, nor necessarily should you. I'm not saying that's a good thing. It's just that this is a constant thing that they're going to be carrying. This is constant reminder, you know, and even if the adoption, then I think she brought up a great point where she was like, yeah, what if they come up and they say, you know, oh, congratulations, you know?
Especially in the case of rape, you know, like you're already dealing with the trauma that resulted in this conception.
Yeah.
Carrying that trauma for 9 months. And in that 9 months, again, like you said, well-meaning people, when do you do? Oh my gosh, have you thought about a name? We should throw a baby shower for you.
I seriously think that would be like a stab in the heart
Right?
every single time.
You
Like
know?
I don't know how emotionally, like, again, I'm trying to get there empathetically, and I know that I'm limited in a lot of ways in that,
Right.
but I could not imagine that.
Yeah.
I could not imagine having to wake up every day knowing that I'm going to have some sort of conversation, whether it's at the grocery store. Yeah, eventually the people that I know will know, but even then, like, what are they going to say? You know, to me, and what are they saying behind my back? You know, what are they
that's good. I didn't
saying
think about that.
when they're saying, when like, oh no, they're like totally supportive, like, yeah, no, it's great that you're doing this and giving up for adoption, or whatever the case may be, or you're keeping it and but there's a stigma that just is there for the whole time.
Yeah.
And I mean, to say logically that you don't want to punish the child for the sins of the father. I get that argument. I understand where they're coming from. And that's what they say, and a lot of pro-life people say in rape. It's like, well, why would we kill the child because the father did a crime? That's not fair.
Yeah.
And I get that logically. I understand the logical thought process there. Practically.
Yeah.
Practically how that plays out, that's where I start to, I think that's why we're too glib with this. I just think that's why it's just too, you can't just put this on a sign, you know, or have a slogan that you just throw out there and get the Thug Life, you know, sunglasses, you know, and just have that be done. Like this is a real human being that is going to be carrying another human being and coming from a place of severe trauma.
I think both sides of the argument, pro-choice, pro-life, were focused so much on the other party. And what I mean by that is pro-choice is really fighting for the woman's ability to choose what she will do, right? The pro-life movement is all about fighting for the ability to safeguard the life of the unborn. But both sides of the argument, I think, fall short in considering the other party. Pro-choice considering the child, pro-life considering the mother. Right. And we're not doing enough to balance that and putting all the weight on one side. And it's just that's where it becomes like a very defensive approach, because the moment you start taking weight off of that and putting it onto the other side of the scale, we're losing, we're submitting, we're surrendering. It's like, well, no, it's not one or the other. It's both. And that's why, like you said, we can't just put a phrase on a bumper sticker and put a thug life, glasses over someone's face. Like, it's much more complicated than that.
It is. It's much more complicated. It feels like a footnote, like when people say, yeah, no, we know this is difficult, but, it's almost like, it's like, yeah. Like, let's smooth over that part because there's lives to be saved.
Yeah.
So we need to get rid of that stuff. And I think that's, coming to the point where I think that where we've got it wrong as Christians is that we are trying to be closing the deal always, no matter what it is. Time is of the essence. And all those things, again, come from some biblical basis of like, life is precious. We don't know when Jesus is coming back. Like, we've got a lot of pressure to be like, let's make sure that people know where we stand and also save as many people as we can physically and spiritually.
Yeah.
And that's in there. But coming against that also is timing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, why does the timing have to be so strict on that?
Yeah.
Why does it have to be like, you got to get this done real fast? Like, why can't you have a conversation? A dialogue with someone where you allow them to speak about these issues and really take it in.
Yeah.
And instead of just going, I know it's difficult, but
you need to hear this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, let's rest in that. Let's sit in the difficulty.
Yeah.
Let's sit here for a bit, and then we can talk about other things after that. But let's really, and I don't think that anyone would care to know our opinions about this if they truly didn't think that we cared.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, if we didn't enter in to that dialogue and say, tell me what it's like tell me the fears that you're going through. Tell me all these things that you're concerned about. Help me to understand them fully so that I can come along with you and not just slap a label on you and then tell you, well, you know what you need to do. So,
So uncaring.
It is uncaring. Yeah. Okay, a few more of these ones,
Yeah.
huh? Okay, so one issue is equality. Without the right of reproductive choice, women cannot participate equally in the nation's social, political, and economic life. Their freedom to decide whether and when to have children opens doors that would otherwise be closed. They may learn to be electricians, librarians, roofers, teachers, or triathletes, care for their young children or aging parents, start and finish college, wait until they are financially and emotionally prepared to support a child, keep a steady job, marry if and when they want to. And I think, again, we won't dwell too much on this one, but I think that what this one brought out that the other ones mentioned as well is the onus on the woman, the fact that it's unequal.
Yeah.
That it really does change the woman's life more than it changes the man's life, practically. And that if it was equal, if men could get pregnant and they would have to carry it, and it was 50-50, half the time it would be the guy, half the time it would be, then maybe there'd be something about this. But because it's so much on her and that it changes her life so drastically, and things that she could have been able to do, she cannot do anymore. Yeah. And things that she wanted to do, she's going to have to find a different way, or maybe have to let go of certain things. And that's a huge deal. Yeah. And I think I can empathize with that. I think I come alongside that and go, yeah, like, that would be really hard to be like, oh, the plans that I had for my life, the dreams that I had, I don't know that I could say for sure. And again, I think that we both need to be careful on both sides of the bridge to be like, we don't know what this means. We don't know that just because you're pregnant, that means you cannot do this, you cannot do that. Now, I totally understand there might be some practical things, but as far as, is that God's will? Is it something, because there's things in my life that I've had experiences like that too, where I wasn't able to do this or that, the other thing. Yeah. But this one, I believe is understandable.
Yeah, absolutely. When you have so many things that you have in front of you with your life and your plans and your goals and your dreams and aspirations, pregnancy doesn't necessarily put a roadblock and a dead end on those things.
Yeah.
At the very least, it creates detours.
Which of these next couple, because I want to get to some other things too, but what do you think is...
I'll go with the last one
okay.
that I have. This
Okay.
is from the Thought Co. This one says, some pro-life advocates argue that the presence of life alone or of unique DNA defines personhood. Many things that we don't consider to be living persons might meet this criterion. Our tonsils and appendices are certainly both human and alive, but we don't consider their removal as anything close to killing of a person. That's again, that's one of those, like, I kind of cringe as I read it.
Yeah.
There's some things in there that I inherently don't agree with, but there's something in there that I see that is a disconnect. And in that disconnect, I can understand where they're coming from. So the disconnect that I see is, and we've talked about this right before we started filming this episode, is we need to make sure that we are working to have a unified definition for these things in this conversation.
Yeah.
Because if we have different definitions for the different elements of this conversation, we're going to be running in circles. We're not going to be getting anywhere, which is,
True.
I think, that is how we got here.
Yes.
We have different definitions. Definitions are constantly shifting for the different elements, important elements of this conversation, and we're just running in circles. And so the idea, and it says many things that we don't consider to be living persons might meet the criterion of having unique DNA. And they use tonsils and appendices. As someone who had his appendix removed recently, if that appendix was found in the gutter down your street, no one is going to think, okay, we need to tape this off. There was a murder scene here.
Right.
But the DNA, the unique DNA found in that appendix is going to come back to me. Yeah. So there's the disconnect of the personhood definition that we see in this. Yeah. But what's true is, having that definition, it's almost as if I understand why you ended up in Las Vegas if you got on this freeway. Right. I was hoping to meet you in Bakersfield. I don't know why I used to be at Bakersfield. No one wants to meet anybody in Bakersfield.
Shout out to people in Bakersfield.
Yeah, sorry. Bakersfield, you the place. I'm moving there soon. But I understand if you got on a certain freeway, you ended up in Vegas and not in Bakersfield. Yeah. And so there's a level of understanding that I think we as Christians, we on the side of pro-life, need to kind of stop and reevaluate ourselves on how we approach that. Yeah. Because a lot of times we read that and we respond with emotion. We respond with an anger of like, oh, how dare you? It's like, whoa, pump the brakes. Yeah. They're on a different freeway. Yeah. Let's just talk about that. Let's not get into a battle, because it's not about debate. It's not about proving anybody right and wrong. It's about understanding the other side. Yeah. And if we can at least start there, we can build towards an understanding of at least of our own positions and being willing to be challenged in our own understanding of this topic. And so I think that's something that we, the church, we as men, can afford to kind of meditate on it principally.
I think so too. And I think that there is something where we can find some common ground here too, is that a lot of what we're talking about are unseen things, and I get the fact that someone who is talking about a fetus, is talking about an embryo, whatever definition they want to use, talk about a pregnancy that has occurred after conception, and even within those first, really, I mean, up until the point where it's obvious, because first you're talking about the fact that it's not really obvious that someone is pregnant until weeks into it. So there's that part, and also the fact that it's unseen. Yeah. So there's this desire, and I think I understand the desire of like it's not, you can't see this, whatever is developing here. Right. Yes, we know that it's life. Whatever the person on pro-choice, pro-life would still discern it as human life. It's something. Just like you were saying, like some people see it as a piece of our DNA, tonsils, appendices, but like that it's unseen, I think makes it unfortunately a little bit easier to think about abortion.
That's true. Yeah.
Like it's not seen and barely felt, maybe even. Yeah. And other people don't see it, and it's just not really something to really have to deal with. So it's just easier. And I think the reason why I say it's both and is that I think also for the pro-life position is that there's a lot of these unseen things that we're not seeing as well.
So good.
Like we're not seeing the issues. We're
Yeah.
not seeing the problems and the concerns and the true struggle.
Yeah.
You know, that those things are unseen as well, you know, and we're not looking. And I think that if we both could see, if we both could look from each other's perspectives and say one side could say, I see that you value this, you know, this life that's here. I see that you see it as not just potential life. You see it as human life.
Yeah.
You see it as unique DNA that is life, that is precious, you know, and for pro-life people to say, I see that there's things that I'm not seeing. Like I want to see the things that are unseen, the issues that are behind this, you know, the reasons why, the concerns, the struggles. You know? And I think if we don't see each other enough, you know, see these things that are unseen, I think that we get really stuck.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Whew. So much stuff.
Yes,
right?
a lot.
So let's talk about where we see we're going wrong.
Yeah.
Trey, we want to bring you into the conversation too. You know, so like when we have this discussion, you know, we're concerned about how Christians are having this discussion in general, that it's becoming, we've talked about some of these things already. You had a personal experience at your high school where you saw some things. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so there was I was leaving, there was a pro-life like demonstration by some random organization. I don't know who it was because it was high school, and that's a while ago, which is kind of weird to think about, but it was a while ago. And on every exit of my school, like when we left, there were these big, you know, signs that were showing like the what is the best word to use for this? Like the
procedure?
The procedure or the aftermath of it.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
It was, it's you don't want to see it, right? Even whatever side you're on, it's not something you want to see.
Yeah.
And it, as someone who is, you know, I'm super mixed on this. It's a super complex topic, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
But it's really like damaging for your argument to like show that as you're like, I don't know how to say it. You know what I mean? It's a
When you saw it, how did you feel?
I was angry, but I wasn't angry the way that they wanted me to be angry. You know, they wanted me to be, that's horrible. We shouldn't do that. I was angry at them. I went up to them and I was like, I'm not going to say I'm with you, but I understand that. And that's not how you should do this. This is not the way you should be doing it. And then they took me as, oh, you're not with us.
Right.
You're on the other side.
Wow.
And it's a poor way of going about it. Because I don't think anyone's mind was changed from that. I think they got what they wanted, which was people to be angry, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, another brick in the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge problem. And I got to be honest, like I didn't go that far, but just being transparent, where I think I went wrong is I taught Christian ethics for 3 years at a Christian high school, and I really tried my best to be balanced. And I think that I might be being too hard on myself a little bit, because I think I was a little more balanced than I'll probably give myself credit for. But it was hard not to want to show the process, you know. And I didn't want to show the real videos, you know, that are out there. That was a little rough, but I did show an animated version.
Okay.
And even just the animation, like my class got sick, you know, like they were physically ill from it, you know, and the people that were open-minded to hearing the issues and struggles, because I had shown some of those things before as well, and maybe it's the way I set it up too, you know, not perfect, but I set up, you know, some of the issues, the reasons why people have abortions, and then I showed them, you know, later on I showed them this video, and the empathy went out the window, you know, like immediately. It was just like, it was just anger of like, how could you do that?
Yeah.
How could you do that? You know, and the tribalism, I think, you know, the drums started beating, you know, it was kind of one of those things of like, let's go to war, you know? And I think that's the problem. Like, yes, that's the reality. Yes, it is really difficult. And I don't think anyone truly, and again, we can't say anyone, but I don't think the majority of women are excited about that.
Right.
That the fact that this can sometimes be, you know, an incredibly violent thing. You know, that especially later on, you know, as it goes forward. I don't think that makes it that they're proud of that they're excited by that. Like, that's not a thing that they're championing. It's just, this is so hard.
Yeah.
This is so hard. And like, yes, that's the reality. But to say, well, you can't because of this, then it just makes it, like Trey was saying, I mean, people just walk away on opposing sides, and there's no empathy anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a thread here that we're identifying. The church kind of falls into this constantly, and that's always appealing through the fear, right? We do this with salvation, with talking to people about salvation, having Jesus as a personal Lord and Savior.
Yes.
We approach it as, well, you don't want to go to hell, right? This is what hell is like.
Right.
We don't want to go there, so this is what you need to do.
Fear tactics.
And we also know that even if a person does accept in that moment, the likelihood of them sticking with a relationship with Jesus throughout the good and the hard times later in life go way down, because it's based out of fear. And so, like what we were saying is, if we can approach with empathy, if we can approach with trying to understand them, understand where they're at, why they've made their decisions, not for the purposes of condemning them, but for the purposes of us being changed. I love what you said in the last episode about asking questions for the purposes of the answers changing me. I think it's so important, and to hear what you encounter, Trey, and to kind of hear what you're saying, I think is that we're identifying the thread here, and we're approaching through the fear.
Yeah.
And it doesn't last as long as we think it will.
And it's not working, right?
No, it's not.
Let's just be real. Like, abortions, yes, they actually are going down, but not because of this. Like, you can't track, the more signs and the more pictures and videos and the more hatred that's being yelled at people, like, that stuff is really changing minds. Like, no, there's a lot of healthcare initiatives. There's a lot of medical advancements. There's a lot of political and social things that are happening to decrease this, because it's really not something that anybody wants.
Right.
I mean, I think that's the bottom line too. It's not like this is something that we're all excited about. Like, we can't wait for this. And I showed another video, and I probably shouldn't have, because I showed the extreme. Like, there was this one woman who has abortion tattooed on her lip. Like, so she pulls down her lip, and the word abortion is there.
Wow.
And a student checked me on it, and I really appreciate it. They're like, you showed something like, that's not, I don't know anyone like that. You showed the most extreme person who was just so excited about abortion that they tattooed it on their lip, and they were right. I did show that. Why did I do it? Because probably subconsciously, I really wanted them to be on my side. And I'm just being real. Like, I wanted them to see this is what it leads to.
Yeah. Getting tattoos on your face, right?
And it's like,
we're all gonna get lip tattoos.
Exactly. Right. No, this is a woman. She made this choice, and there's all these different things going on too with her, I'm sure. But like, that's this. It takes the debate. Not even the debate. It takes the conversation out completely. So true. It totally changes it. And it really just makes it impossible to empathize with anybody who would possibly make that choice. So that, I think, we have issues with, with the way that Christians approach this. And as we kind of try to bring this to a close, I think what we could talk about really is finding the common ground. And I think landing in the Word, since we haven't really gone to the Bible. The reason why we didn't do a lot of Bible verses is there's really no verse that says this is what.
Do not commit abortion.
Right. There's just it's not in there.
That.
Yes, there are verses about God knowing us before we were born. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of verses about that. Psalm 139, Jeremiah 1:5. Yeah. Ephesians 1. I mean, there's all those things, and I get the argumentation there about that. But I think what this episode is more about how to have empathy for someone and how to come alongside them. And I think that there's no better example of that than in John 8. With the woman caught in adultery. And so I just want to read that for us, and we'll reflect on that as we draw this to a close. So early in the morning, Jesus came again into the temple, and all the people were coming to him, and he sat down and began to teach them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, and having set her in the center of the court, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery, in the very act. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What then do you say?" They were saying this, testing him, so that they might have grounds for accusing him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground. But when they persisted in asking him, he straightened up and said to them, "He who is without sin among you, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. When they heard it, they began to go out one by one, beginning with the older ones, and he was left alone, and the woman where she was in the center of the court. Straightening up, Jesus said to her, "Woman, where are they? Did no one condemn you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "I do not condemn you either. Go, from now on, sin no more." So many things that we can draw, obviously, from that passage, and we're not going to do like a whole, exegesis on it, but you should look up that word. It's SAT word. Pulling out from the scripture what it says. But I think just in trying to land here is that acceptance is not approval.
Yeah.
That accepting someone wholly for who they are doesn't mean that you're approving everything that they do. Right. That you may come against this. And again, we don't mean to be offensive by saying that adultery and abortion are the same thing. We're not trying to parallel them and say that that's exactly the same. The issue that we're trying to get to here is like accepting someone fully and loving them for who they are. That's what we're trying to get to. That's what we're going to get to that space.
Yeah, and it's a real challenge, right, for us to approach someone, having an understanding that they're either caught in some kind of slip up, some kind of struggle, right? But like you said, loving them where they're at.
Yeah.
Right. Loving them where they're at, and then loving them enough not to leave them there. I mean, that's what we see with Jesus doing in John 8. Loving this woman enough to meet her where she's at, not requiring her to change before meeting her, but meeting her where she was at.
Yeah.
And then loving her enough to tell her those last few words, "Go and sin no more."
Yeah.
And that's out of love.
Yeah.
Right. Because the love or the sin is what separates us from God. And so understanding that, getting that, removing that from your life is what's really going to fulfill what you've been chasing.
Yeah.
And
I think that even him not saying the specifics of the sin is pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Go and sin no more. Like, don't do the things that you know are wrong.
Yeah.
Like, don't do those things. And that's the point that he was making, is that with all these other guys, they had this stuff, they had their own stuff that they weren't acknowledging.
That's so true.
And this is where, again, I think we can really land, is that let's really be humble here.
Yeah.
Let's really be humble here and not try to elevate something that God is not elevating. Yes, God hates things like in Proverbs. There are 7 things that God hates, right? And shedding of innocent life is one of them. Mm-hmm. So is divorce.
Yeah.
Is on that thing too. But yet, like, people can get divorced and still be in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there can be these things, and even Jesus gives exceptions to divorce.
Yeah.
Like, there's these things where, like, the word is black and white on this particular issue, and it's like yes and no. Like, it is black and white in some places it isn't black and white, and you have to allow the person to make the choice as to what do they believe is right here. Mm-hmm. And if they believe something that you don't believe, and you can say it's not right because I can back this up, you may be right. In fact, let's just be honest. Like, we do believe that abortion is wrong.
Yeah.
We believe it's morally wrong.
Yeah.
We really do. We don't see the justification for it in Scripture, but we do see justification for empathy.
Yes.
We do see justification for not thinking that sin is any worse than any other sin.
Absolutely.
And we're open to the fact that we might be wrong.
Yep.
We could go to heaven, and Jesus says, you know what? Actually, there were circumstances. There were things that you missed, and that's fine. Yeah. But I'm not going to lay my life down and fight so hard and offend everybody else on the way and say, I'm not going to have a relationship with you. I'm not going to be able to open this dialogue with you because I have this stance.
Absolutely.
That's not what we're going to do.
And to kind of bring this to a close, Jesus did everything he could to maintain a relationship even when he was bringing correction.
Yeah.
Right. And so, to the best of our ability, not just Zach and myself, but anyone that's watching, anyone that's listening to our voices, that's what we are inviting, we're imploring, to do the best that you can to maintain the relationship. If you have a disagreement with somebody, whether it's about abortion, divorce, whatever it may be, do the best that you can to maintain that relationship and sharing your concern. At the end of the day, we really want to maintain that bridge of communication, whether that is never going to be, whether that's not going to get touched on for a year or two because of how sensitive this issue is, or, maybe it's within a week. But the reality is we need to make sure that that bridge is still open, and so that anyone can feel that they're cared enough to be able to re-engage that conversation. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole point of the podcast, is to be reconciled, even with the unpleasant things such as abortion and any other thing that we're going to be talking about in the coming years that we have planned up. But unless Jesus comes back before then. So, but I know we've talked a lot about this issue. We talked a lot about what what's going on, the conversations. And so we just want to, again, just remind ourselves and anyone that's listening, this is not comprehensive. There's so much more to this. And we are excited about the idea of continuing the dialogue outside the church and with people that you love. And so until the next time that we meet, we just want to encourage you to be reconciled to God and reconciled to each other.
Amen. Amen.